Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, I want to talk about a topic here because a lot of us, we're talking off-season mode. We're talking about free agency. We're talking about draft. We're talking about all these things that the Indianapolis Colts need to do to improve this team. And I think one thing that is clearly the number one factor in a lot of this, and a lot of time we've already discussed it at some length, but I think it's something that continuously just gets passed on from some people's viewpoints, is Anthony Richardson and his development and whether or not he's going to be the quarterback of the future. A lot of it is going to basically talk about, how much he needs to improve. And here's the question: even if he improves, or if he doesn't improve enough, what comes next year? That's going to be the big aspect of this. But Cody, before we really dive deep into this, do you agree that the number one thing that is going to determine the success of 2025 really falls on the development of Anthony Richardson as a player, in regards to like everyone saving their jobs, the team not, going full sail on all these veterans? Do you feel like that's the most important thing for next season?
I think it has to be, right? Because I think everybody is tied to the success or failure of Anthony Richardson. I mean, that's a reason why Jim Irsay even gave these guys another chance in the first place, right? Was because he still, even if it is waning, is going to give these guys, for better or for worse, talking about the big three, of course, with, Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, and AR, going to give them one more year to prove that they can figure it out, right? And I know, Derek, a lot of Colts fans, it's the offseason. We talk about how the offseason in so many different ways is like the optimism time. There's a lot of Colts fans that are singing a different tune this offseason. You just don't have to go very far under the Colts post, Jim Irsay's post, even some of our stuff, where you see like fans are checked out. There's a lot of fans who are kind of punting till 2026, which is crazy. So to say it all depends on Anthony Richardson, I think, is a massive understatement. I think it's going to determine whether or not we are talking about a complete reset from GM all the way down to the starting quarterback next year. I really do believe that. And I think it's critical, man, because you've tied yourself to this. You have no more excuses. You've excused yourself away. We've talked about this. This regime has been one of excuses and of what ifs for the past near decade. And this is your final, straw, I would think, right? I don't think there's anything else you can say to justify it. You can't run it back again trying to sell fans on anything. You just can't. So, yes, it absolutely does determine the future of everybody here on the development of this young kid, Anthony Richardson. And to be honest, Derek, there's a lot stacked against Anthony Richardson from, the completion percentage-wise, which I'm sure we'll get into, the health factor, and obviously there was been some questions about his mental toughness, right? We talked about that, the tap-out stuff, all that stuff. There are so many things stacked against Anthony Richardson, and even has led some of the most diehard fans to really have their faith waned in Anthony Richardson in a lot of ways. So, yes, to answer your initial question without going out onto another rabbit trail, yes, I absolutely would say that Anthony Richardson is the number one thing that is the most important before you talk about, players you're going to add or anything like that. Your young quarterback's got to prove one way or another if he's the guy or not.
Yeah, so now, it's obvious that the Colts have a million different things that they need to get better at. But, of course, if your quarterback is not going to be the brain and the engine that has this whole thing going together, then ultimately it just really doesn't matter. You've seen what quarterback play really does for, a team. Even if you just look at, the Philadelphia Eagles, if you're talking about the Commanders, right? Like, obviously defenses help you win championships, no question about it. But you have to have the quarterback that is going to consistently keep your offense in the right frame of mind to be able to do the things that you want to do offensively. So here's the big question, Cody. So we talk about him improving, right? But now the big question is, what does that improvement look like? Because the people's definitions of improvement are going to be drastically different, right? There's some people that will say, hey, if he increases his completion percentage by 5%, yeah, somewhere like 4 or 5%, and throws more touchdowns than interceptions and does that sort of thing. And, he stays healthy for, 14, 15 out of the games, then that is enough for people. And then, there's some people that'll tell you like, oh, well, he needs to be more like completing 8 to 10% better than what he was just last season, needs to drastically get more touchdowns passing the football, and, needs to be available for at minimum 15 of the games this next year to really kind of answer a lot of the questions. Because like you said, we have a lot of questions with him. We have questions about his durability, his reliability, his ability to make the consistent throws, to not turn the ball over. So you have a lot of those issues, but so let me just kind of break it down for you a little more. What would it take for you to give Anthony Richardson another year after this year? So he goes through the 2025 season. He shows the improvement that you needed to see to say, okay, we're going to give him one more year. Let's see if he can continue to do that and keep more consistent and do what Josh Allen did after his rookie year started to get better. What does that improvement look like to you from a numbers standpoint, from a personality standpoint? What does that look like?
Yeah, so you referenced Josh Allen. That's good because I was just looking up his stats, kind of his, you talk about his infamous year 2 to year 3 jump, right? So just for some reference, Josh Allen, his rookie year, 52.8% of his passes was drastically better than Anthony Richardson from that standpoint. AR was 47.7%. So even at his worst, Josh Allen was not as bad as Anthony Richardson from a completion standpoint. And then he jumped that up to 58.8. So that's a 6% improvement right there. And then, Derek, the big leap was taking it from 58.8 to 69.2 in year 3. So, Derek, I think 10% has to be the standard. I do. Because it can't get much. It has to be. I would almost say you have to go plus 10%. It needs to be right around that high 50 to 60% at the minimum for me at this point,
Okay.
right? Because
Okay.
let's face it, 50, even going, if you raise it like 5%, that's still well below the standard for starting NFL quarterback. Yeah. I mean, that's how bad the completion percentage was for Anthony Richardson. Again, wasn't completely all his fault, but again, Derek, you can excuse that all you want. All quarterbacks have to deal with that in some capacity, right? So, yeah, I would say 10 plus at the minimum of an improvement from that standpoint. I think you need to be high 50s to low 60s. I would feel pretty good about that if he made that jump. Obviously, you talk about the touchdown to interception ratio. You had 8 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. That needs to drastically get better. I would say, obviously, from a health standpoint, I want to see Anthony Richardson string together a full season, or at least near a full season. That would be huge for him. And yeah, and I want to just see him in more of those situations like in that New England game, where you have to come down, you have to win the game, you have to be composed. Because I would say this, Derek, if there's one thing that Anthony Richardson had done really well in his short career so far, it's he is not afraid of the big moment. Like, you've seen that in multiple games in his career so far. I mean, that Rams game, we saw it in the New England game like I just referenced, and even a couple other games as well where he was calm and collected when he needed to be, right? So I do think that is a positive thing right there if you're pulling out some positives out of all the negatives. But yeah, I mean, he's got to string together games of being healthy. I want to see him string together games where he's actually playing well also, because we've seen games where he's played bad. We haven't really seen him string together some great games, doing that. And I want to see some, because really, Derek, his second season, we really didn't see him, maybe outside of maybe what the Jets game, we really didn't see him have a game where you're like, wow, okay. Like, again, his season's not going great, but he just threw for 3 touchdowns and 350 yards,
Right.
and
We
threw for
haven't seen
70 plus.
those.
Like
Yeah.
maybe like 1 or 2 of those games, maybe not even 2. So I need to see at least some of that, right? Some of, rookie Anthony Richardson moments a little bit more from that standpoint. So there's a lot there that I need to see from Anthony Richardson, and obviously the mental thing. And I hope that is that whole thing of getting benched. I'm hoping that was a major wake up call. I mean, from a preparation standpoint, it seemed like it definitely did something to him in a positive way. But again, you have a full off season now. You have time. We're away from the facility. What are you going to do in those moments? Are you going to slack off? Are you going to do what you're not supposed to do? Or are you going to do everything you can to be that guy, right? So all that to say, Derek, going back to what we said, that's a lot to overcome. That is a ton to overcome. And, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to do that. I don't know, Derek. To be honest with you, my faith has waned in Anthony Richardson. I'm going to be completely honest. After this season of being injured and seemingly taking some steps back, again, we can talk about the scheme with Shane Steichen, the play calling, the personnel, all that stuff. The one last thing I would say, Derek, is the ultimate thing for me with Anthony Richardson is if the Colts lose games next year, you look at it and Anthony Richardson is not in your top things to blame for that. I would say he was in the top for one, not the top, but he was one of those things.
Oh yeah,
that really hindered and held you back in certain ways during the course of the season. Just his lack of development at times and his lack of availability at times also, which forced Joe Flacco in there, and your offense. When your defense was playing well, your offense wasn't. So all those things, Derek. He needs to not be the reason why, you lose games. And he needs to be able to help lead you to games. He needs to be that quarterback that's going to elevate the guys around him. Like we've had some good quarterbacks in our time with Indianapolis, right? We've seen those quarterbacks, those greats, right? Who doesn't matter who you give them out there, they're going to go out there and make plays, right? You see that with quarterbacks now, like quarterbacks that maybe they don't have everything they need. It's not going to be perfect, but they're a good quarterback. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen that from Anthony Richardson. I didn't see that from him in year 2. So I would say all those things, but ultimately, Derek, he's got to be, say you go, you don't make the playoffs again this next year. And I think a lot of people are kind of expecting that, but just for this scenario, you don't make it. The only thing that would say keep Anthony Richardson is if he was available, if he was playing well, and if you look at it and say, he was not a big reason why you didn't win all these games. He, in fact, was a positive in all of the negative. That's what I would say.
As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Because, yeah, you look at it kind of like last season for the Bengals, right? You look at like any person in their right mind that wants to insinuate that Joe Burrow was the problem with the Bengals and why they only won 9 games that season. Like, I know there's a few people in the national media that have had, that have been paid enough by the networks to stoop that low, but that's ridiculous if you think that he had anything to do with him being the reason why that they were so bad. I mean, everybody knew what the problem was with the Bengals. Their defense was bad for a good chunk of the year, and their offensive line is terrible, and they weren't able to consistently run the football. Not saying Joe Burrow was the best quarterback in the world this last year, but he was certainly very great, and most people would have put him probably near the bottom of the reasons why the team was so bad. And that's kind of the feeling that you need it to be right now. You kind of do need to be in that, like, okay, so we're looking at, is it still personnel problems? Is the defense, because it's only year one of Lou Anarumo's defense and they're still trying to get used to it, and that's why they're so bad, right? Or, maybe injuries to a couple really big names that really suck for you. Yeah, you're right. Things like that come into fruition at times, but I did talk about it on a live stream the other day, and I was talking about, like, what would it take to convince. Somebody asked me, like, what would it take for you to say that Anthony Richardson did enough to improve to you? And you're right. I think that 10% increase is right at about where you need it to be. I mean, Cody, we'll give Richardson the benefit of the doubt a little bit on the receiver drop thing. The Indianapolis Colts were near the bottom of the barrel when it came to drops in overall the amount of times that we did throw the football, because Anthony Richardson threw the football a lot less frequently than a lot of other quarterbacks in the league. So, of course, he's not going to have the most drops in the league, but when you base it off of how many times he threw it versus how many of those were drops, they were up there like second worst in the NFL. Given that, we give him a 3% maybe increase in his throwing, 3-4%. I mean, hell, you can even go to 5 or 6% if you wanted to be that drastic. Even if you went to the highest extreme level, still completing barely 55, maybe not even 55% of your passes, which, like you said, that is not a number that your franchise level quarterback should be throwing the football at. Your numbers should be somewhere in the mid 60s to be consistent enough to be able to have consistent quarterback play. And do I expect him to be a mid 60s thrower after this year? No, but like you said, that high 50s, approaching 60% is right at about what I hope that he will be. I hope that if Ballard gets him a weapon at tight end that is going to be able to consistently catch the football more, and, maybe Pittman doesn't have a case of the drops at the beginning of this next year, the tight ends we'd get 1 or 2 really good tight ends and just get rid of everyone else, then maybe guys will actually be better. And, that would be better. You need to see a drastic improvement, increasing your completion percentage by 6-7% this next year is it's just not enough. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be approaching 10%. Like, again, I'm not expecting him to be completing 65%, but like you said, that high 50s to almost 60% should probably be the mark to say, okay, we're starting to improve on the accuracy standpoint, And I mean, 10% may not seem like a lot to a lot of people, but 10% is quite a bit. I mean, that will, you'll see a major change in how many more drives will be, a lot more consistent with him completing a high 50s to low 60s when it comes to completion percentage. Yeah, outside of that, again, I don't really question the decision making a lot of times. I felt like a lot of times last year, what his main problem with the turnovers, a lot of times, again, his weapons kept falling to the ground and that forced interceptions. Also, at times, I felt like he made the right throw, but he threw it in the wrong spot. And that's again, the accuracy becomes the issue. You remember a couple times when, what was it, the game against Chicago? I think he threw an interception there where Michael Pittman is wide open 20 yards down the field and he still overthrew him and ended up throwing an interception. It's like, it's stuff like that. Like I think he's getting it to the right read more than half the time. I think the problem is just executing it. And, we hope that, working with Chris Hess this offseason is going to, help to improve that accuracy. Maybe if he does change his throwing motion and how that ball comes out of his hand, maybe it will help fix some of the drop issues that this Colts team had to deal with this last year. Yeah, it's going to take a lot, but if he doesn't vastly improve, man, I mean, are we expecting? I mean, I don't know if it'll actually happen. I mean, we can never tell when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts and Jim Irsay. But I mean, does that go full scale? Like Ballard's gone, Steichen's gone, refresh, just start fire sailing the veterans and just going all out. Is that where we headed for if AR doesn't improve?
I think if the team continues to not, meet expectations or get anywhere near expectations, then yes, I do think that's going to be a reality where you almost have no choice, right? If you just want to see your fans completely checked out, I mean, you're already getting to that point. But if you want to see it even worse, Derek, I mean, try to run it back again a year. I dare you, Jim Irsay. Like, I promise you, man, fans who are already checked out, there's going to be many more who still have that little glimmer that's there, that little sliver of hope that's there. They still have it. They're going to be out, man. Like, if your diehards are saying things like this, you got problems. But yeah, again, there is still like a chance, like however minimal, however small, there still is a chance that Anthony Richardson could prove to be the guy. Now, am I going to go out here and say that he's going to be? Absolutely not. When you put yourself at a 47.7% completion percentage, I mean, you can't get much worse than that, Derek, to be honest with you, right? So he's only going to go up from here. He's got to go up, right? He can't get any worse. But yeah, I don't see anything, Derek. Even if you kept him on your roster, even if he's like, still there under contract for one more year, I think you look at it and you say, dude, we've given you 3 years and this is what you've done with that. You've either not been available or you haven't been very good. And
Yep.
and so that's just the reality. And I think you blow it up starting with Chris Ballard. You probably fire Shane Steichen, that whole regime there. You get a new GM in there, you let him hire his coach, and then you go draft a quarterback in 2026. I think that's what you got to do, man. Sometimes you just got to, I think, admit defeat a little bit and not try to keep kicking the can down the road. But again, like you said, this is the Colts, so they never seem to operate like the normal logic would dictate. So who's to say? Who knows, man? But I would say if I'm a betting man, and I'm not, but if I was, I would say that if it doesn't, meet expectations, if you aren't anywhere close, if Anthony Richardson doesn't show any significant, not even just marginal, like significant improvement, I think you got to go look for a quarterback in the draft in 2026. I don't think you have much of a choice. I really don't.
Yeah, I can see that. And I think a lot of Colts fans would agree with you. And that's it for you guys. Let us know. What do you think? What is it going to take for Anthony Richardson to do next year to convince you guys that he's done enough to improve? And ask as well, if he doesn't improve enough, what should come next for the Indianapolis Colts? I have a feeling I already know, but we're going to find out in the comments if you guys let us know. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.